Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we're joined by Andrew Stotter-Brooks, who's the Vice President of Learning and Development at Etihad Aviation Group. Welcome to the show, how are you?
Chris, I'm fantastic, delighted to be speaking to you.
It's nice to see you again. I'm always impressed with the backgrounds as well. You'll tell everyone a little bit more about these backgrounds, the people that can see it.
I'm just very conscious that we have a very strong message, and a big part of that is keeping it really simple and keeping it human. So the more that we can keep our message nice and simple, and we don't really miss an opportunity. Recently, obviously, we're doing a lot of virtual stuff. It's useful to have our message constantly kind of like feeding in the background. We've had a big focus on diversity. So actually today, we mixed it up a bit today because we normally have a little girl superhero behind me, but today we've kind of changed it just for you, Chris.
Yeah, I love it. To be honest, I've always loved that saying, be the change you wish to see in the world. It's a great one as well. So yeah, it's always good to use that real estate, right? Especially when you're virtual, to constantly ham home the message and have it there at every point. So
it's been one of the I'm kind of hesitant to say that the pandemic has been a success for us, but I suppose, from an L&D perspective and just from learner numbers and learner engagement, it's definitely been huge. I mean, Winston Churchill was famous for saying, "Don't waste a good crisis."
Yeah.
And I think we haven't wasted a good crisis. Definitely from a learning and development perspective with EAG, it's been a very, very productive journey for us. We always had a very clear idea that we were going to try and take a lot more of our learning content virtual. And of course, some of the beautiful things about virtual is that we can obviously record it. We can then create quite a significant library. We have an internal podcast we call for the World Class Wednesday series, and we've now recorded 81 of those shows. We're not quite in your league, Chris, but we've had some spectacular guests, head of NASA and some of the Dean of Harvard and some really amazing guys that I've interviewed in that. But the beautiful thing now, look, I mean, at the time, it wasn't really my plan really perhaps to look back on that catalogue, but now we have an enormous catalogue of fantastic topics that our team members can kind of look at and review and we get many tens of thousands of views, which is quite staggering. And obviously it's an internal audience. We do invite the occasional external person to come in as an audience member, but the vast majority of it is people learning. We were getting like 7,000 views at some, the NASA guy, we picked up like 7,000 views on that, which for us was staggering.
Yes,
really,
amazing.
Really good.
Why not have it external as well? Because it'd be from an employer brand perspective and for people to learn more about you, the team, the business. Isn't there such a big opportunity there?
I think that's perhaps where we're going to go next. We're trying to, at the moment, our plan is to get to our 100th edition. And then I think the whole thing needs a shake up. I mean, we kind of stumbled into World Class Wednesday, if I'm really honest. I mean, it was 18th of March, 2020, the world kind of ground to a halt for us. We were, the Abu Dhabi government took the very, very sensible and right decision to kind of ground our fleet, apart from humanitarian aid and kind of cargo to help people out. And at that point, it was really, we had an enormous number of team members on the ground who then I think potentially would get bored of Netflix.
At some point.
At some point. So perhaps we could actually offer them an alternative. And we originally, with that particular project, I initially thought, well, let me just do some basic educational content. I think it was around coaching at the beginning, because I think coaching is such an important topic. But we kind of started doing some basic foundation work around coaching. And we put the opportunity of a learning event out into the Etihad kind of ether. And I think something like 4,000 employees dialed into it, which I was I had to say, was slightly terrifying.
I bet.
Recently, it was really weird because we do big numbers in virtual space, but obviously then going back out, this week, I was mentioning a few minutes ago, going back out and then doing live events in front of 5,000, 6,000 team members. That's actually been quite staggering. I'm a fairly seasoned facilitator presenter, but when you suddenly have, you forget what it's like to stand in front of many thousands of people and present. It is different, mate.
I get terrified. Like, even people are always surprised about that. Even, at our events, we have 10,000 plus people watching virtually, but I can't see them. So it doesn't really, there's just a camera in the office. But speaking in front of those people face to face I find that terrifying, to be honest. I don't think I'll ever get over that. Like, I still do it, but it never gets, I always feel nervous, but I understand that's just part of it. I'm going to feel that way.
I think that's a good thing though, Chris. I mean, if I'm honest, I think I am equally terrified. I hate the 5 or 6 minutes leading into world class, or, go when we're speaking this week, at the big events, those 3 or 4 minutes like leading into it is absolutely horrendous.
How has the last 2 years been? Obviously, as an aviation business, significant disruption, but that seems like that's also at the same time led to a lot of growth internally and within the work that you do, it seems.
It's been, I think we had to kind of reevaluate what we were doing and how we did it. And that's probably the biggest learning there. I suppose for us, the huge advantage was that we had a very clear strategy about the direction we were taking before anyone had even heard of COVID. And so what actually happened was that when COVID kind of hit, we were so well advanced on our strategy, actually, as again, I'm hesitant to say that it's a good thing, because it really clearly isn't a good thing, but it definitely helped what we were trying to achieve. We had a 2-class, kind of 3-class learning system in the organization. And of course, once we kind of went to virtual, it was like, everyone was on the same class, which was fantastic. So there was a lot of issues with people not feeling included. We run, 74 different locations around the world. We have team members, obviously, globally. And if you weren't living and working in our sort of headquarters in Etihad town, which is in Khalifa City in Abu Dhabi, I think you felt you were kind of like getting a 2nd-class or 3rd-class learning product. But then, of course, going to virtual, everyone kind of got the same kind of 1st-class product that we then started offering people. So that was a huge benefit. Obviously, just the way we kind of go about business, we're obviously in middle of a huge transformation program as well. So in some ways, it's been useful because we've kind of really accelerated our plans as far as transformation. It has been devastating. The good news from our point of view now is obviously the business is absolutely racing back. So our loads are just, that's amazing.
How many people are you hiring right now?
We have a lot of vacancies. We have
thousands, probably
vacancies. Yeah, many thousands. Lots of vacancies for cabin crew, pilots. Yeah, I bet. Ground crew engineers, security. Yeah, please let me know if you want to join.
I'm in. Yeah,
always a place there for you, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I suppose this was always a natural progression, because in order for you to reach those pilots, those cabin crew, those people working in all the airports globally, you have to have a virtual approach. Because you're not going to be able to reach everyone, and they're on the move. They're in different times. They're all over the world. There's a lot. It sounds really. I'm going to go back to my. I often talk about my daughter when we talk about the way the sort of next generation starts to learn. My daughter, is a very, very bright lady. Works in Abu Dhabi. Interestingly for me, and I often tell this story. She's a fanatical cook. She loves cooking. Incredibly creative. I'm very, very lucky because both my grown-up children live at home with me, and they both work in Abu Dhabi. We all work in Abu Dhabi, the complete family unit, which is absolutely amazing. Very quickly, how did that happen? Very quickly, because people were listening probably like, how did the whole family end up there and working there? Just very briefly, how did that happen? It basically happened because we've been working outside the UK for a number of years in many, many different countries around the world. We're very, very lucky. I got the great opportunity to join an organization that wanted me to go and work internationally, which was fantastic. And once I kind of got a feel for working very much with different cultures, kind of one thing led to the next. It's quite, a lot of people who know me would say that, stocks, you have quite a high risk strategy. So I tend to kind of go feet first into things, And I suppose because my children then have been on that journey, my beautiful wife have been on that journey with us, then they've become very acclimatized to working with many different cultures around the world. That's amazing. And then, of course, when they then graduated from university,
they became very attractive for international employers, and of course, particularly Middle Eastern employers, because we obviously have a very, very long. We love the we love the region, we love the people, and have a very good, good exposure to those. A lot of friends in the region as well. So it became quite almost natural for them to easily find work in Abu Dhabi, which has been very lucky. I'm a very proud father.
I bet, because that's something that. I noticed that kids that are brought up in that environment they tend to become very self-assured, resilient. Just the confidence that comes with that. Like for me, the idea of going to work in a foreign country, would be terrifying. But it's probably all it's what they know. They're just used to it. They understand that's the different cultures, environments, and that must be really a huge strength to have as a young adult.
I think it just broaden. I mean, I think everything comes from experience, right? Because experience drive beliefs, and beliefs, they kind of drive the values, and they kind of drive what I call the artifacts. So I think they drive kind of what you see. And I think that's interesting. So the more that you broaden your experience base, the easier it becomes. And I think just your experience ultimately molds who you are, the artifact, or how you present. So the more that you can expose, for me, being able to expose my children to so many different cultures around the world, and then of course letting them go loose, it's been a very interesting journey, quite terrifying at some points.
Yeah, I bet. But I'm sure it doesn't come without that.
But fun.
But they're like, well, Dad, you did it, so you can't complain.
100%.
You can't be like, no. They're like, wait a minute, we did exactly what you did, so
no excuse. I got no excuse. I got nowhere to run.
Yeah. So back to, sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry, but I just wanted to share that story with everyone because I thought it was really interesting. But back to what we were discussing before about this now having this learning strategy that is accessible to everyone globally.
Yeah, so I was telling you the story about Georgia and how, obviously, because she lives at home, and Georgia is a phenomenal cook. But what's important for me in this particular setting is how Georgia learns to cook, and that's, I think, fascinating, because what she likes to do, she obviously would identify a recipe. Then she would, and there is a particular order to how she does this. So she would think, like, I would like to learn how to cook whatever it is. Let's keep it really simple. So chocolate fudge brownies, for example. So I want to make chocolate fudge brownies tonight. So that's the aim. That's the kind of the end goal. And then what she then does, she goes, right, so who's the best person in the world who makes chocolate fudge brownies? So is there a particular chef? Let's say, for the sake of argument, probably predominantly British audience here. So let's say maybe Jamie Oliver. So she then goes and looks for a Jamie Oliver recipe on chocolate fudge brownies. Then what she then is very good at doing is then finding him, Jamie, actually with a YouTube video or some type of podcast of him actually making the said item. What she's then able to do is obviously then collect the ingredients, make sure she has the right equipment, and then she will then watch that video. But the beautiful thing is she can pause Jamie. So she can pause Jamie. She can rewind Jamie. And then, of course, you can then, and actually the final outcome, the actual final product, the chocolate fudge brownie, is spectacularly good. And I would kind of argue with you that I've never tasted one of Jamie Oliver's, chocolate fudge brownies, but I think if you had Jamie's brownie and George's brownie in the same room on a blind taste off, I think it'd be hard to tell the difference between the two. And that's the kind of the beauty of this. So I think the idea that people can learn not just how to make chocolate fudge brownies, but they can also learn lots of other skills in the same way. So, and that's one of the beautiful things about kind of the whole virtual environment we've been creating over the last couple of years with the whole COVID pandemic, is that a lot of the stuff that we do is we record a lot of content, and that makes a massive, massive difference. So I think it's just really important that people understand that learning is really changing. And I also think, I was speaking in some very, very posh places recently. I won't name drop because I think it's inappropriate. However, we've been talking a lot about this concept of micro learning. And when we started our micro learning journey with EAG, the first part of that was we kind of said, let's be really ambitious. Let's try to keep our learning to less than 3 minutes. Because using kind of the Georgia analogy, the Jamie Oliver kind of like chocolate fudge brownie, let's actually try to keep stuff to really, really short, because we know that people have a very short attention span, yada, yada, yada. So let's keep it short. What we've actually found on that journey is that their attention span isn't 3 minutes. Their attention span is about 70 seconds. So what we've then done is we've taken, I know,
Wow.
So people are probably turning off as I'm speaking now. So we know that if we make a video for about, 70, 80 seconds, actually we get people seeing the whole duration of it. If we make it for 3 minutes, they tend to drop out after about 2 minutes. So I think it's really, 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 really important that we kind of understand that kind of concept, really.
It's fascinating what you're saying, by the way, because people always ask me, how do you, do this podcast and build a studio, and if you behind the cameras we have all this fancy equipment, and it's exactly the same way. And by the way, I cook the same way. I have my iPad right here on my kitchen counter, and whatever food I want to make, I will find someone cooking it on a YouTube video, and I'll just follow it step by step.
Yeah.
And the end product becomes a lot, if you did that versus just getting a list of ingredients and the time you should cook it versus actually watching someone step by step, the results 10x, because you're doing it exactly how they do it. Similar when I first built my first PC, I literally bought every single component to build my computer. And it was like a 15-year-old kid on YouTube. And I literally held up each component as he held it up, paused it, put it in the PC, and then did it again. So literally step by step, I was literally, as he picked it up and put it in, I did the same thing. And that's how I built, and I had no idea what I was doing. It was more learning in the flow. And then as I was doing it, I was like, oh, that's what that does. Oh, that does that. And then at the end, I pressed the button and the PC turned on. Could I explain to you what every single thing was doing? No, but I can now build a computer by watching a YouTube video. And it was amazing. I did the same thing with my 10-year-old nephew recently. He was like, oh, Chris, I want you to build me a PC. I said, no, what we're going to do, we're going to buy all of the components. I'm going to come over to the house, and I made him watch a similar video, and he built his own PC. And I remember seeing his face. He was so happy. He was like, I can't believe I can build a computer. And he was like, that's the brain, that's the motherboard, that's the thing, that's the memory, and this is what the memory does. And now he can build a PC, and he's like 11 to be able to do it. So yeah, it's incredible. The tools that we have at our hands right now, just the internet in general, is fascinating. Like, it really is, like, learning really is a superpower. You can do anything that you want, really. Yeah.
And just and it's really weird because some of the people, a lot of people say to me, but I get what you're saying, Andrew, but people don't want to use. This is a really, I think it's a really important point, particularly if you're sort of leading in business like we do. They say, people don't like to use their own personal devices. They don't like to use their own, data packages, yada, yada, yada. But to be honest with you, they do.
Who says that?
I think, exactly, Chris. I hear that so much from old people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No. Old people say, people don't like to learn that way. It's like they do.
They do.
They like a lot of choice. They like a lot of choice. They like to take control of their learning.
In their own way.
Learning.
Yeah.
In their own way, and how they do it. Some people like to spend time with me, bless them, face to face. And some people like to watch a video. Some people like to read a book, and some people like to have a go at doing it, and they're comfortable failing. Like, they like to learn how to build a computer themselves on their own, in their own space, with no one watching. Bless them. Let's provide different learning opportunities for different learning styles and different ways that people like to learn. Make it easy, make it easily accessible for people. We talk about. There's I suppose a lot of my learning strategy within definitely EAG, but definitely historically, it's always been the same thing. I tend to, for me, very simply, there's kind of four things that we really focus on. There's two things I believe are massively outside of my control as an educator. The first one is, someone's genuine desire to want to learn something. Ultimately that's their personal choice. I can't really do much about that. They're making a personal choice to kind of take the journey. The one I think is massively overused, and it's in my mind a complete waste of money, is telling people they must do it. Chris, you must do this or I will punish you. Because when I'm dragging someone to the water and saying, I demand that you drink now, they might drink, but they do it really grudgingly, and I don't really want to do this. I don't want to be here. So for me, those kind of the edges of those kind of like the parameters of learning, you must do this and you want to do this, are kind of outside of my control. So, but it comes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago. For me, it's all about, accessibility to learning. So making sure that people know how they can take the journey if they, of course, want to take the journey. And then, of course, wrapping that up in a lot of kind of should stuff. So I talk about, what the benefits of learning would be if you should you decide to do that.
Yeah, what does it mean for you?
The benefits. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does it mean for you? So that kind of that can and should for me are the huge parts of where learning happens, and that's where you get massive engagement. We tend to don't spend too much buck on mandatory stuff, and kind of we don't believe you can want to do things. So that's important. We obviously have mandatory training like everyone else, and we have compliance training. Completely get that, but I still feel that it's much better if people want to do it and they have access to it easily. Yeah. You're going to get much bigger bang for your buck.
Yeah, you just got to create the right environment and give them the right tools and make sure they're accessible. Like for years, I really struggled to retain information, and I was reading books for years, and I was like, why am I? And then this is really challenging, like reading all of these books, for over 10 years, and even when I first got into my first corporate job, and then I discovered audiobooks and all of a sudden I was listening to these audiobooks and I was retaining everything, and I realized that that's how I learn. I'm more and also videos. I'd rather watch a video about a book or listen to an audiobook, and I could retain it. I was like, oh my God, this whole time I've been reading books and it isn't really my learning style. So now I only listen to audiobooks and watch videos, and it's just been a game changer for me. I've always struggled, even as a kid, to read books, and I notice other people are opposite. They love a book. They love physical hard copy. They love a book, but for me, it just didn't work, and I was just forcing myself to do that for so long. Even painting, like we talk about our strategy in our business, and Shane and I will, he'll write it down, and I would draw it. I would draw a picture of the vision of our company and where we are, where we're going, our next 3-year strategy as a landscape with the mountains and the things. And for me, that's how I visualize our business and where we're going. And I have that picture on the wall in our office. And it seems weird to some people that you've got a picture that you've drawn, but that's what resonates with Chris, and that's how I perceive knowledge. It took me a long while to learn that.
No, you're not alone, Chris. I mean, other people have different, and it's about making sure that people get what they need. It's making it kind of like I love the word, but like a smorgasbord of learning, and sort of laying it out as a buffet, making sure people can fill their boots. Yeah, it's very important.
In our last conversation, you spoke about the 4 levers that drive behavior, which was really interesting. Could you share more on that?
Well, I said really, it's about, I suppose it's just really what we've been talking about. So it's trying to avoid the the must, first of all, because definitely must drives behavior. So you must do it. Not that effective. Again, allowing accessibility to learning is huge. So that is the key for me. And of course, talking about why we should do it and really kind of engaging people. I think I suppose the half the battle is actually about, we're trying to move to a more, there's this huge difference between what we would call human doing and human being. And I think there's a big focus there for us as an organization. We're not saying that human doing is bad. Human doing is, of course, it's very, very important. So it's achieving things and flying the airplane and maintaining the service and the safety of the organization. That's all critical to our success. But actually now, more of a focus on that, that human being piece. Again, very much the topics we've just been discussing, making sure that we treat people as individuals. We don't treat them as a mass. Every single person is different. We discussed it a few minutes ago. You have a different learning style to me. And my daughter has a different learning style to me, and she prefers to do it in a certain way. My daughter has different interests to me. So really it's about that as well. And I think the other thing we've really found beneficial recently, we're doing a lot of work trying to understand the types of people that we have within the organization and what types of work most excites them. And we don't really want to be putting, square pegs in round holes, or round pegs in square holes. It doesn't really work. And I think sometimes we've been doing quite a lot of unpicking of that in our organization. Sometimes people find themselves in a role, they think they're attracted to that role. It might be if it's finance or engineering or maybe even HR. And then suddenly they think, actually, I don't really like doing that. I'd be much more comfortable doing numbers or be much more comfortable doing, engineering, getting my hands on something, or actually working with our customers, our guests, and doing a bit of, profiling with them. We have a huge career advisory site, so it sounds absolutely crazy, but internally, I'm trying to really help people with their careers and identify the types of things that are of interest to them, and actually making sure that they see the opportunities, or they can kind of close the knowledge gaps or the experience gaps that they would need to take that particular journey with us. Yeah. So I think these are very, very big challenges for any organization. It's, it's a huge challenge that we have. We have a very simple model. You can probably see it behind me. I don't really miss an opportunity to kind of plug our methodology, but we talk about kind of knowing, doing, and being. Right. And I think, as we've just been discussing, knowing things is relatively simple, because we can kind of go and we can you said it yourself, you built your computer. Did you really know what you were doing? You were just kind of like following the process, yes. Right? I'm taking that chip out and I'm putting it in there, and I'm putting that circuit board here and I'm doing that. And that's kind of how it all comes together. And I kind of screw it up and then, hey, presto, the computer works. There's a world of difference between knowing how to do it because you're following an instruction. I think the real challenge for us and for humans is the what we would call the doing and the being. So I think there's two pieces that are really important around that, Chris. The first part, and it sounds really silly, and please forgive me for kind of like raising it as a concern, but definitely and I've worked in a lot of different organizations. I'm very, very privileged in my career. I mean, I'm genuinely a very privileged person. I'm not talking specifically about Etihad, although we do have some of these issues. And that is the idea that we're asking managers to measure employees in particular pieces of knowledge. Yeah. But the problem is that the manager doesn't really have a good understanding of the knowledge themselves. So therefore so we're asking Chris to measure Andrew on. Yeah. And that's a bit of a worry, right? Because that causes massive frustration for the employee, causes huge frustration for the manager, because he or she doesn't want to feel embarrassed that she doesn't know the answer to the question. So what we're trying to do is actually allow the team member to be on the same page as the manager. So there's clarity around what the team member should know through the different career structures, and basically what that kind of looks like in practice. So the application of the knowledge is really important. So the knowing and the doing. And of course, then the final part of that equation is what we would call our being part, which is the values of the organization. So then tying those values and how we act and why we act in a certain way, why we have a policy around excess luggage, or why we have a policy around security, or why we have a policy around, with our pilots closing the doors, whatever it might be. There's always a very good reason behind a policy. I think the worst thing that a lot of customers get very upset when we kind of like use the language. It's a bit comedic. I appreciate that, but computer says no. Yeah. So when you're faced with a team member or a guest service provider who just looks at a guest and says, computer says no. Yeah, computer says you can't do that. That's what the policy says, sir. That is not particularly helpful for the team member, because she doesn't really understand why. Because organizations don't have policies just to make it difficult for customers. Team members have, organizations have policies that there will always be a very good reason why that policy exists. When I came into this organization, I'm fairly new. Well, I'm brand new to aviation. I've only been in the space for about 2.5 years. I could talk for years on that particular topic, but the interesting thing was I was asking this one particular question when I joined the organization, and that question I must have asked it to about 130, 140 team members, quite senior team members around the organization, and no one could really give me an answer to that question. And that question, if you're interested,
I'd say what is it? Yeah.
That question, I'm conscious of my 70-second rule here, but that question was, why don't we have like dedicated flight crew? Why don't we have dedicated cabin crew who always work together? Yeah, and no one kind of could really answer that question for me. It was like, oh yes, but it doesn't really work. Like historically, it's never really worked like that, Andrew. So I was like, yeah, but I'm hearing that, but why don't we do it? It's huge benefits. If we had a group of individuals who were always working together. You played ice hockey, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, there's huge benefits of playing with the same team, right? Because you start to understand how each other plays and the strengths and the weaknesses, and you can fill those holes and yada, yada, yada. And then one day I met a very, very beautiful pilot called Duarte. He's a Portuguese chap. And out of frustration, I said, Duarte, help me with this, mate. Can you answer this question? Because no one else in our organisation can answer that question for me. And I'm not joking. Must be 130 people I'd asked. And he looked at me and he goes, there's a very, very good reason why we do that, Andrew, why we don't do what you're suggesting. And I said, go on then, Duarte, hit me with your very good reason. He said, because it's about trust. Yeah. And if I become over familiar with the person I am flying with, if Chris and I are basically flying to Los Angeles and we're both pilots together in that flight day, if I have a very good relationship with Chris, I kind of go, do you know what? I trust you, Chris. Let's not do the safety checks today. Yeah. And Chris goes, yeah, Stott's my buddy. We've been out, we had a couple of beers last night. It's all going to be fine. Right. Actually, what we're doing is we're putting the aircraft in significant danger. Yeah. Because we can be over trusting in a very, very, technical environment. Actually, what we really would be much better off doing is saying, before we fly the plane, Andrew and Chris have never really met each other. They're qualified, verified to fly. So when they meet each other, they're almost like they're checking each other.
Yeah, because that's what, when you meet a new person, you do step your game up a little bit, don't you? Like, because you want to make sure that it's like when you first start a new job and you're getting to know your new manager, your new team, you're always like trying to make sure everything's perfect. You don't skip any steps. You're right. Whereas the more you get to know each other, there is a bit of complacency that can creep in. It's not that people are trying to be lazy. It just happens.
Yeah, it is. It's just normal. It's just how things happen. There's been some tragedies quite recently around that, where people become over familiar with each other, and because they're so familiar, they kind of like, and it's not that it's not no one's fault. It's just over familiarity can cause challenges. So there's the reason I was explaining that to you was really more about, it's about understanding why we do things. So if an individual understands a process, and we're at a big conference today, and we're spending a lot of time helping different parts of the organization understand how different parts of the organization work, just top level. Because actually, when I get an understanding of what a particular area division does, it just makes it easier for me to understand where my part is. Because I have there's a couple of questions a couple of statements that kind of really send me over the edge, Chris. The first thing that really sends me over the edge is when team members say, and it always starts with, "I'm just a." Yeah, so they say to me, "I'm just a member of cabin crew. I'm just a, guest service agent. I'm just a pilot. I'm just a HR officer. I'm just a financial officer." And it's like, and I go, "You're not just anything. You are a critical part in our business, because without you being on your A game, we will fail, and it doesn't matter what role you play. If you're cleaning the bathrooms or you're flying the airplane, for me, you are critical to the success of the organization, right? And so helping our teams understand they're not just an anything. But Stotts, I'm just a security guard. I'm just a cleaner. No, that's not, that really kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, so, I get frustrated about stuff like that sometimes. As well, because some of those people that say those things are a lot of times they're client facing, and the most important. They're the people that are face to face with our customers every single day, and every other position. I put a reminder here in my notes to ask you, because I remember it and it stuck with me, to tell everyone your Wizard of Oz story. so I want to make sure I get it in there.
Oh gosh, Grace, you're embarrassing me now. It's one of my favourite stories, particularly around accountability, because if you think about the classic fable of the Wizard of Oz, I love that movie. My kid call it a grey film. That's the grey film, isn't it? It's like, yes, it starts off as a grey film, and then about 17 minutes it comes into the glorious kind of Technicolor. That is the Wizard of Oz that we know. And obviously, 1938, a long time ago, that movie was produced. But there is a very, very important sort of kind of story for me, and it linking back to what I've just said about, I'm just a ... If you're not familiar with the Wizard of Oz, I'm sure most of you are, but Dorothy obviously finds herself in this kind of alien land, and she's obviously desperate to get home. And a good kind of like, witch at the beginning, or fairy at the beginning of the fable, suggests that she should go and talk to the wizard, who'll be able to solve all of her problems for her. And of course, she then, utters the immortal lines, well, where can I find the wizard? And of course, the fairy says, you follow the yellow brick road. Yeah. So she embarks on this kind of journey with Toto. And on the journey, they obviously come across three characters. First of all, she meets the straw man, or the scarecrow as we would know it. And of course, the scarecrow has a problem because he thinks he hasn't got a brain. Yeah. So of course, Dorothy convinces the scarecrow to come on the quest, and let's go and talk to the wizard, and he'll get you a brain. So the scarecrow kind of buys into it because he doesn't think he's smart enough. So he takes a journey. Next character they meet, obviously the Tin Man or the Axe Man, depending on who you speak to. But the Tin Man, he hasn't got a heart, right? So he's desperately looking for a heart. So of course the same story goes on. The wizard will fix you, no problem at all. And then ultimately they meet the lion, and of course the lion has no courage. And obviously on that journey, they go through lots of adversity, right? They fight against, flying monkeys and all sorts of other kind of mythical creatures, and a wicked witch that really has a problem with the water. But anyway, they overcome all of those kind of like barriers, and eventually they demand an audience with the wizard. And when they demand the audience with the wizard, they're obviously bitterly disappointed because he goes, do you have any idea how important I am? I haven't got time for scarecrows and tin men and lions and silly little girls. Go away. And of course, they then, for the first time, really take personal ownership of their future. And they kind of, slightly naughty, but they break into the palace, right? And they then demand to talk to the wizard. And of course, they then find out very, very much to their disgust and their disappointment that the wizard is just like you and me, Chris. He's just human, just blood and flesh. And there is no magic in the wizard. I think too many people look at people like Chris Rainey. I'll exclude myself from this, but they look at sort of, talented individuals and they go, he must have some magical skill. No, that skill is not magical. It's about taking personal responsibility, personal ownership. It's about, using the talent that you've given. It comes down to a lot of hard work. And of course, Toto saves the day. And ultimately, the wizard then suggests to the characters that the lion had courage all the way along. He just needed to recognize it. That the Tin Man had bucket loads of heart. He just needed to recognize it. And of course, the scarecrow was as clever as anyone else. And I think that's a beautiful story. And of course, he says, click your heels, Dorothy, and you're home. And of course, she does, and she's home. End of the movie. But there's a really important message there, which is about taking personal responsibility and accountability.
Yeah, no, I love that story, by the way. So that's why I wrote it down. I wanted to share it with everyone. And I felt like that for a long, long time, even when I started this company. And I was, interviewing some of the most, talented minds in the world. And I would be really self-conscious and like insecure about, oh my God, I'm about to speak to, Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School, right? And I was like, oh, and I'm really nervous about it. And then I would start speaking with them, and then I would realize halfway through the conversation, on air or off air, they're just like me and you. And even some of the billionaires that I've had on the show, I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to speak to this person whose net worth X billions, and I'm like thinking that there's something, how am I going to have a conversation with this person? And again, I'm like, wow, he's just a very down-to-earth person, still goes home to a wife and kids, also has struggles as well, and and he's got to where he is through that growth mindset, learning, etc. And it blew my mind. That was probably one of those eye-opening things of starting this podcast, is getting to know what people perceive to be these invincible people and leaders, that they all have bad days. They're not what makes them special is their hard work, dedication, commitment, and their habits actually that they've developed as well. So yeah, I love that story, and I think it's a perfect way to wrap things up. But I know you've got a longer day ahead of you, more events, more speaking as well. But before I let you go, yeah, that's your job. But honestly, really excited for all the work that you're doing, and I definitely have to come and say hi to you. Come out and fly out and say hello in person.
You're always welcome here. We would be delighted. I should turn the cards. I should interview you, Chris. I know that would be that's a big ask, but I should get you to come and speak to our audience. They'd be delirious.
Oh, now I'm terrified even more now. Now I'm terrified even more. Before I let you go, where can people connect with you if they want to reach out and say hello? Where's the best place?
Obviously, definitely LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm a fairly large profile, big sort of followership in LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from anybody. And I'd love to, if anyone wants more detail about our projects, our strategy, what we're doing, anyone's looking for advice, always encourage them to reach out to me.
Amazing. Look, thanks so much.
LinkedIn is fun, yeah.
And for everyone listening, as always, that link's already below in the description. So make sure you go and connect with Andrew. But Andrew, enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
Chris, keep being brilliant, mate. Keep owning it.
Thanks.